Everyone knows about the dangerous creatures lurking in the jungle, from jaguars prowling beneath the leafy canopy to crocodiles hunting in murky waters. But what if I told you there was one kind of predator you've never heard of before? In the deepest, darkest jungles of Madagascar and Nicaragua, there are chilling accounts of predatory plants preying on humans. Yes, you heard me right. Man-eating plants. So turn on all your lights, lock your doors, and sit back to enjoy this week's episode of Shadowy Visions. The first tale of man-eating plants comes from the unexplored jungles of Madagascar. This island is home to some of the strangest creatures on the planet, so it should come as no surprise it's said to be home to a species of carnivorous trees. The first account of the man-eating tree surfaced in the late 19th century and was reported by the botanist Carl Lecce. In his travels across Madagascar, he encountered a cave-dwelling tribe of pygmies called the Makoto. After befriending the tribe, they brought him to an isolated lake located deep in the mountains and showed him something which would haunt him until the end of his days. At the edge of the lake, he encountered what he called the most peculiar plant, which was said to resemble an 8-foot-tall pineapple. He described the tree as having dingy brown bark, which was as hard as iron. At the apex of the plant there were 8 massive leaves with sharp teeth like an agave. The edge of the tree had strong, thorny hooks, and at the center was a white pitcher oozing a clear, treacly liquid. There, he watched with horror as the tribe began a ritual sacrifice. A band of men emerged from the jungle and brought forward a young woman. Clearly terrified, she was forced toward the monstrous tree at the tip of their javelins. Once she reached it, the tribe cried out, "Tsik, tsik," which means drink, drink, until she at last complied and consumed the liquid dripping from the plant's pitcher. This is Carl Lecce's account of what happened next, published in the South Australian Register.
The atrocious cannibal tree that had been so inert and dead came to sudden savage life. The slender, delicate pulpy, with the fury of starved serpents, quivered a moment over her head. Then, as if instinct with demoniac intelligence fastened upon her in sudden coils round and round her neck and arms. Then, while her awful screams and yet more awful laughter rose wildly to be instantly strangled down again into a gurgling moan, the tendrils, one after another, like green serpents with brutal energy and infernal rapidity, rose, retracted themselves, and wrapped her about in fold after fold, ever tightening with cruel swiftness and the savage tenacity of anacondas fastening upon their prey. And now the great leaves slowly rose and stiffly, like the arms of a derrick, erected themselves in the air, approached one another, and closed about the dead and hampered victim with the silent force of a hydraulic press and the ruthless purpose of a thumbscrew. A moment more, and while I could see the bases of these great levers pressing more tightly towards each other, from their interstices there trickled down the stalk of the tree great streams of the viscid, honey-like fluid, mingled horribly with the blood and oozing viscera of the victim.
Carl Lecce continued to observe the site of the sacrifice, and noted the leaves of the great tree kept their upright position for 10 days. Then, on the 10th morning, he found the tendrils once again stretched out, the pitcher refilled, and no trace remaining of the victim except for a white skull at the base of the plant. But could such a man-eating tree exist? Osborn, the governor of Michigan, trekked across Madagascar at the turn of the 20th century to investigate the reports. While he encountered numerous missionaries and tribes who spoke of the devil tree, he could not verify the existence of the plant. Still, he noted in his book, Madagascar, Land of the Man-Eating Tree, that in the past he'd witnessed huge pitcher plants which feasted on small mammals and lizards. So, he reasoned, a variety of man-eating tree could well grow in the darkest corners of Madagascar. What do you think? Does a man-eating tree still lurk in the unexplored jungles of Madagascar? Even now, one might be ensnaring an unwary traveler. Our next account comes from the jungles of Nicaragua. There, Mr. Dunstan, a naturalist, was collecting samples of flora and fauna. in the depths of a fetid swamp, while searching for new species. He froze when he heard his dog cry out in pain. He sprinted in the direction of the yelps, but slowed when he found himself ensnared in a network of fibers and roots. When he looked up, he noticed his dog was completely enveloped by the writhing plant, which resembled a pit of adders. Drawing his blade, he waded into the vines, desperately hacking at the sinewy strands. The tough fibers resisted his knife, and he was barely able to cut his dog free. As he dragged his pet to safety, he discovered it was covered in numerous puckered wounds, like something had been sucking its blood. It was only then he realized the vines he'd severed still lived, and had wrapped themselves around his hand. After a desperate struggle, he tore them free from his flesh and hurled them away. But his hand was left covered in blisters and abrasions from the fangs of the plant. He retreated to a safe distance and watched as the vines continued to writhe, exuding a thick, dark sap which gave off a terrible odor like decaying flesh. His native guides, drawn by the commotion, arrived at the site of the attack and were horrified by the sight of the plant. They informed him he'd encountered a devil's snare. Many in the tribe had been trapped by the plant in the past and had only been able to free themselves after sustaining serious injuries. Mr. Dunstan attempted to study the plant, but was unable to determine many details as it continued to strike at him. But he noted the vines were covered in hundreds of little suckers, which became animated when close to an animal. He believed the mouths drew blood like a vampire to feed the plant. To test his theory, he had his guides toss a piece of raw meat to the plant, and together they watched silently as it drained every drop of liquid before tossing it aside. He said the veracity of the plant astounded him. But could such a thing exist? Strangely, something very similar is found in many backyard gardens across the world. The dodder is a parasitic vine which latches onto a host plant to drain it of nutrients. Many botanists have compared the dodder to a vampire, as it sinks sharp fangs into the plants and drinks the sap. Does a larger, carnivorous version of this plant exist in the darkest jungles of Nicaragua? Only the natives and those brave enough to traverse the dangerous swamps know for sure. Thank you for watching this week's episode of Shadowy Visions. What do you think about the man-eating plants? Do they exist? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Before you go, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget, always watch the shadows because they're almost certainly watching you.